If you've got big dreams and bad genes, you are in the right place. These shirts are available at barbellapparel.com, link below. Today, I am very honored to have somebody who is arguably the premier strength athlete of the modern era. You'll know him from winning gold at World's Strongest Man, the Arnold Classic, the Shaw Classic, the Rogue Invitational, from dominating world records, dominating your social media feed. Today, we're talking to the Canadian Moose, Mitchell Hooper. Mitch, thank you so much for being here today. How the hell are you?
Yeah, I'm great. It's wild to think that we are 2.5 years or 3 years removed from none of those titles existing, and it's been a whirlwind.
Yeah, it came through quick, and people have talked quite a bit about that rise, at least from our perspective. Having your birth onto the scene around 2020 or so, and then going to winning so many titles. That's actually part of the first question I wanted to ask you. It was of some concern or some interest, I guess. Really, the durability that is required, not just to kind of exist at this level, but to make it at that rate, to go from 7, 8, 9, 1,000 pounds in such a period of time. What do you credit your durability to when it comes to making that rise, but also to being able to compete so aggressively at these high level shows at the pace that you're keeping up right now?
The first thing I think people need to understand is, I think your durability has a genetic capacity just like everything else does. And so let's say that I can go to a Giants Live and I can perform events at 90% of my capacity. Well, even if that absolute number is very high, if it's well within my means, I can control the weight well. I don't have to overreach per se. And so the amount of time that I overreach is limited. And to be honest, more often I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing in training when I'm overreaching than something in competition. But when we think about the body and how it adapts, I think a big error that can be made is specializing in strength sports early. And the reason that I think that's an error is because naturally the body responds and reacts to the forces placed on it. And whilst it might feel like a maximum deadlift is the most force your spine is ever going to feel, if you jump off a 6 foot ledge and land on your heels, it's probably more force than a deadlift. So I think having a huge athletic background in a variety of things has made my body robust in ways that strongmen wouldn't have trained me to be. And I also think the kinesthetic awareness from a variety of sports in the past has been a big asset to me. So every time I give people advice who are 15, 16, 17, wanting to become world's strongest man, I always say just worry about moving and learning your body and enjoying sports. And then after you're 22, 23, 24, that's probably the time to go full into it.
And you have a pretty robust background. I mean, you've done everything from American football to golf and running marathons and so on. And that's a point of discussion pretty often is, well, is that type of work something that you can expect to provide transfer, or is it something that's different entirely, or chicken or the egg? You know, are you something special that's able to do all these things? I happen to subscribe kind of to that perspective that you always go from broad to narrow in your training, and the more well-rounded you are in the beginning, the better off you're going to do. That's an interesting point, though, because when you compare kind of the best strongmen, or I should say some of the most legendary ones, you go back to the early days like Bruce Wilhelm and Kaz and Don Reinhardt. Many of them were like, you know, Olympic lifters or collegiate wrestlers, or did all kinds of things. And I always thought about that from a performance standpoint. Did that help their performance? But I never thought about that from a durability standpoint, as far as making you, you know, able to persist longer.
For sure. And every sport has its common injuries and common movement patterns where you look at it and you just wince and you just know something bad is going to happen. We know that in strength sports for sure. But there's a different set of movements in golf where you're looking going like, that's not right. And so playing, say, 10 different sports at a high level, I have a variety of kinesthetic awareness of just immediate, like this freaks me out, I'm not going to do it. And I think that's why I can push harder in training than a lot of people and avoid anything serious, because I know when something serious is going to occur. At least I believe that I do right now. And I think that's how I've avoided it to date. I do have the full admission, though, at some stage, something is going to fall off a bone. That's just the nature of the sport.
It is, and that's something you have to accept going into it, or you're going to have a rude awakening. I think the joke goes, right, you're not really a strong man until you've lost a bicep. I lost mine flipping a tire, and I don't even want to tell you what the tire weighed. So given that reality of the sport, And especially like injuries, they're not just a pain in the ass. They set you back so much. It's like you can't get training and build up that momentum to get to the height that you need to if you're dealing with these little niggles or tweaks or strains or whatever. What interests me is you said you think you know when something's about to go wrong, or you assign some like kind of conscious awareness to when you're overreaching, and that's an I don't want to say an argument. That's kind of a point of curiosity I've had, especially with a lot of like the movement optimist people or people that kind of paint with a broad brush as far as what the causes of injuries are, because it seems very difficult to try to give real hard actionable advice to people with like, this is what you need to pay attention to in your training, because it could be so many things. What are some of like the concrete things you look to kind of keep you on the straight and narrow, to keep you in that like balance of stress and recovery where shit just doesn't go flying off the bone?
Yeah, well, look, I think I know very intentionally because I know someday I'm going to think I know and learn that I, in fact, do not know. Um, but it's often the types of pain that's being experienced, and understanding the difference between a inflammatory like pain, like a tendonitis of sorts, to a more chronic pain. What does a muscle pain feel like when it's torn versus DOMS? What does a tendon pain feel like when it's a dire concern, and when it's just something that's going to be annoying? And it's body part specific as well. We all know knee pain and squatting. Your knees can feel absolutely horrendous squatting, but you're going to be diagnosed with patellofemoral pain syndrome, which just means that you have a sore knee, and you're like, yeah, I know, that's why I came here in the first place. You never really have that explode into something. That being said, if you go up above the knee and you've got quad tendon pain for a sustained period of time that's not improving, you're losing quad mobility. Okay, now we're thinking that this could be a problem. So the best example I have for you is I had some sort of tear at the Rogue Invitational on my bicep. I don't know what or how much or how bad, because I have the Canadian medical system to deal with, so I don't have the privilege of imaging because I'm not dying. But that type of pain, that sharp, pinchy pain, especially unloaded, especially not improving with movements, I knew that is something that if I pushed and tested, it was not going to turn out well for me. So I firmly believe I avoided a complete rupture by just being reasonable and going, this type of pain is not acceptable, where I'll go through a back pain, or I deal with the right hip bursitis all the time. And I know bursitis is bursitis. You're not going to lose your hip because of it. It's just going to be really annoying. And all that's going to happen is it gets more painful or less painful. So that's the best explanation I can give you. I'm probably somewhere halfway between the movement optimists and the, I don't want to call them evidence-based on the other side, because I think there's evidence supporting either. But there's certainly, I think we would agree, a lack of clarity on exactly why things happen and how they happen. And anyone with a correct answer is someone with an incorrect answer. So I just, I try to manage myself based on how I feel. And I think intuition is an extremely valuable thing for someone who's trained and educated, even to a small degree, even YouTube educated, 10 hours worth. I would say you probably have the best idea of if this is okay for you or not. And moving ahead that way, I've found is really successful. The only additional thing I'll add, with injuries in the first place, the psychological component seems to be as large as the physical components. And so if you have full confidence that you're moving in a way that's not going to hurt you, I believe that confidence in the definitiveness in which you move and in which you try to do things will also contribute to a reduced risk of injury.
Yeah, it's something being like in your line of sight, taking up your conscious energy. I experience that on things that should be simple. Walking with a yoke, right? How hard is it to walk? It's ingrained into like the most like basic part of our being. But if I'm anxious over a weight, or if I'm trying to cue something a little too hard, then it's like the whole chain goes down. And especially if something's hurting. And that's probably one of the things I think that's informed my reaction to a lot of this is I've been at it for very long, kind of middling around like the mid-range, kind of getting a little close to some more competitive ranks. But even that, the wear that my body has taken on, you cannot go forward without a willingness to push through, like to progressively, whether you're actually using progressive overload or you're just trying to level up, you got to be willing to deal with training where shit hurts or with you're not quite sure. So I think you had a very reasonable take. It always just grates me when the people that are kind of selling themselves as having the answers are overly vague, paint with a broad brush. And then it's like, okay, that's great. My knee hurts. I have to squat. I have a contest in 6 weeks. I'm going through tubes of Voltaren like crazy. like, should I be worried? What do I do? And in my experience, like some of the worst injuries came out of absolutely nowhere. And I think like you can see the look of surprise on some people's eyes when you see it just go. And that's kind of something you just have to be ready for.
Yeah, and it's always, these people always come up with these answers in hindsight, or these, on the sort of movement optimist side. It does drive me mad when someone's doing a deadlift and their back goes from stiff like a board to like this, and then they get a disc injury, and then these people will go like, that's the reason why. And you're like, well, not really. It doesn't really work like that. There's so many factors, and we're probably just shooting in the dark. But it is funny. It seems that the stronger and more capable you get, and the more competitive you get in sport, the fewer number of allied health practitioners you can go to who can actually make sense of what's going on, because you'll go to them and you say, when I squat 300 kilos, my knee is sore. What should I do? And they're like, oh, well, have you tried just like not squatting for a while? And you're like, well, no, I can't do that. It's like, well, I guess we're just going to beat our head into a wall.
And then it kind of makes sense why you get a lot of voodoo that pops up, because I mean, people, I think in this field, keep like chiropractors in business. Or I mean, you'll get everything from like cupping to scraping to acupuncture, because there's a point where it's like the doctors aren't going to do anything except say, here's some anti-inflammatories, stop doing whatever you're doing. And obviously that doesn't work. So it is unfortunate that there is such like lack of data. But I mean, the intuition thing, I think, makes a lot of sense. That's obviously something you can only really get with a lot of experience. So you got to kind of burn yourself a couple times until you kind of get a sense of that. But this kind of leads me to something that's more general. And I know it's certainly interesting to me. I'm sure it will be to other people. But that's just like the bare bones of, I guess, how you structure your training in general. And we could layer this a bunch of different ways. I mean, how does Strongman train? But like, how do you train to get strong fast? Or I'm interested in the structure of the training that allows you to juggle so many different things, given the variety that you see, the sheer goddamn weight that you're lifting now across so many different events. And it's like, you got to be prepared to go from 8 events here in 6 weeks, 6 events over here. And it's just a constant rotation. Are there some broad guidelines you follow with arranging your split or trying to juggle these? Or do you feel like a lot of it comes out of a few things where if you focus on that, you're going to be kind of made in the shade?
Yeah, well, to preface this, it's of course a team effort with me and Lars, and I very much subscribe to smart people make complicated things very simple. So I'll do my best to do that. I'll compete 8 times this year. 4 of which will be ones that are shows that I need to be particularly prepared for. In those shows, you're going to have 5 of the same movement patterns for sure, which is going to be an overhead press of some sort, a deadlift, a carry of some sort, some sort of leg-based strength test, whatever that may be, and then you'll probably have some type of throw come up. But even though a log and a dumbbell technically are very different things, I think if you're generally prepared for powerful triple extension, you're going to be doing these fairly well. So I would take these 4 shows and I would take those common movement patterns and try to be as prepared as possible for those throughout the vast majority of the year. That's a big challenge in how our season is structured. We've got the Arnold end of Feb, March. We're going to have World's Strongest Man mid-May. We'll have the Strongest Man on Earth in August, and we'll have the Rogue Invitational in the beginning of November. And layperson might see those spaced out and be like, oh, they're kind of evenly distributed. But on the flip side, your off season is sort of 6 to 8 weeks. Now you got to think of what shows do I have to be my strongest for, and what shows do I have to be what I would consider to be the best strength athlete for. And you want to be your strongest for the Arnold and for Strongest Man on Earth, and you want to be a good strength athlete for World's Strongest Man and for the Rogue Invitational. And so you can sort of see this like really overarching periodization where I'll go for this block of like high strength for the Arnold, I'll go into World's Strongest Man, and I'll try to hold that strength while getting a bit fitter for Worlds. Then I'll have a little bit of a more relaxed period. So when you see me at Royal Albert Hall, that'll be a period where I'm training, I'm working hard because that's what I love to do, but it's going to be higher volume, resensitizing to strength when I go back to that. Then we'll basically do that again. So I haven't thought of it this way, but it's almost like the season's in two halves. You've got the Arnold into Worlds, which is strength into more athleticism. Then you have Strongest Man on Earth into Rogue Invitational, which is the same thing. So you can sort of repeat these two mesocycles, if you will, to be able to peak for the right things. But it's funny. There are times of year where deadlifting 900 for me is very difficult, and times of year where I could just walk up any day and do it. And of course, there's many different factors to that. Some very obvious and some less obvious. But it's one of the most difficult things to manage. That's for sure.
I can only relate to the fringe of that because I've been competing for a long time. I've probably done close to 60 shows in my time doing this, almost exclusively at an amateur level, but
60.
I've been competing since like 2006. Yeah. Since I was a teenager, back before it was cool.
Yeah.
They were better days, Mitch.
Is it
back
cool
before
now?
it was cool.
Do you think it's cool?
Strongman? Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah. Yeah. No, the growth that has happened is absolutely insane. And I remember in the early days, everybody was like, grow the sport. And I'm sitting here in 2025, like, let's push the pendulum back a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's great for the guys that get paid. I mean, it's great for you, and it's great for the people that run shows, and everybody gets these bigger events. So overall, it's really good. But it's like now you have a sport unlike powerlifting and Olympic lifting where there's actual fans that don't compete, and sports fans are they're something. I'll just say that.
Yeah, they're different. They're a different breed. For the record, I think it's cool. I'm glad I'm not the only one in that category, because when I describe it to people and they're sort of like, "Why do you do that?" I'm like, it's my job because I like to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like because I'm a freak and I use this as a coping mechanism. You ever find yourself confused by the complexity of programming? I know I struggled like crazy in my early strongman career. There was just too much advice, and every decision I made felt like a guess. As soon as I hit a snag in any program, I would have no idea what to do, so I would inevitably bail. It took me years of training and coaching to figure out how to predictably increase muscle and strength, both in myself and others. And those lessons took me to my own showings in World's Strongest Man, America's Strongest Man, and the Arnold in the 231-pound weight class. This is why we made BaseStrengthLP, to give clear, direct, and personalized instruction right in the middle of your workout in real time. BaseStrengthLP features 3 programs: Block, 70s Powerlifter, and Bullmastiff, each one inspired by the work ethic and programming of the biggest and strongest bodybuilders, powerlifters, and strongmen throughout history. These templates originated in my book Base Strength, and they can be ran as is, but with BaseStrengthLP, weight and volume are prescribed to you on your specific feedback, and that's personalization that even an online coach can't replicate. This gives you the absolute certainty that every rep is meaningful, that every block of training is getting you closer to your goals. It's my programming, but it's your program. Get the heart of old school training with the intelligence of a coach right in your back pocket. Head now to basestrength.com. No, it's the growth has been absolutely insane, and that's that leads to something a little tangential to this, because not only are you like at the top, right, and you're kind of the guy to beat. You've won was there a name for it? You said you won all 4, not the Triple Crown, obviously, the Quadruple Crown.
Yeah, Grand Slam.
The Grand Slam. Yes, very, very nicely done. Congrats on that, by the way. But you're at this unique spot in the sport at the present moment, but you're also doing a great job kind of building your legacy and a career and making sure you're going to receive something for the rest of your life, hopefully for your kids and grandkids as well, instead of just letting this fizzle out by running social media and your businesses and so on. So what's your experience been like kind of dealing with the attention, be it the fans or people that interact with you online? How have you kind of handled that? What are some of the observations you've had?
Yeah, I'm definitely not the same person socially now than I was 3 years ago in a couple of different ways. The first is I'm certainly way more robust now than I was when I first came onto the scene. There were times when I would be on Reddit defending myself about this or that, and it's like, you know what? It is what it is. It also has really taught me that good people can dislike things you do, and they can honestly dislike things you do and have a point. And sort of removing your ego from that, and you've got this beautiful analysis of yourself. If you're me, I can go on any platform and look at how people currently feel about me in a given moment. And one of my favorite studies is the jelly bean study, where if I have a jar of jelly beans and I ask you how many jelly beans are in the jar, you're going to be pretty poor on average at guessing it. But if we got 1,000 people to guess, it seems that the more people you get, the closer they are to the truth. And so you can sort of, I think of that a lot when I do something and it's dumb, or I say something that hasn't been responded to well. If on average people haven't digested that well, defend yourself to all eternity if you wish, but that's ultimately what people pulled away, and you're kind of responsible for that. So it's been difficult, and it's, there's an element of me, and I choose what I put out there, and sometimes I put things out there, and I know people are going to be upset, and it is what it is, and it's one of those things where you can be nobody, and nobody will hate you, and nobody will love you, or you can say, here are the things that I care about, here are the things that I'm willing to talk about and share, and some people will love it, some people hate it, and that's okay. Honestly, I said this to you when I had reached out a week or so ago. It's been such a great personal development for me to see someone like you, who, like, you haven't said resoundingly positive things 100% of the time about me, which anyone who's being honest can't, because you're not that person. You're naturally going to disagree. But there's a really respectful way to go about it. And when it's respectful, now I'm like, okay, this person is they totally have a point. Like, I'm not perfect, and that's cool. And learning that you're not perfect and everything you do isn't perfect is such a weight off the shoulders, because you're like, you know what, maybe not. And now there's no pressure to be that person. So that's it. But that's the me element. The bit that's a bit harder is the people who didn't sign up for it and didn't choose to post this online. So, for example, my sister runs the clothing brand. Of course, my wife is across my social media. And, a very simple example. I posted a video with a girl on my shoulders doing like a floating barbell, just stupid thing, whatever. Nobody knows who she is. She's a girl who works for one of the brands who I work with, whatever. But then there's always a comment. I'm like, what does your wife think about this? And my wife will respond and be like, I don't care. It's fine. But that's the bits where, like, over time, getting called out about your family and them being involved in it and them seeing people talk poorly about you, that's probably the part that people don't get. But with all due respect to all of the Strongman fans and whatnot, all you have to do is sort of like scan a crowd of Strongman fans and go like, there are a vast array of different types of people and personalities involved in here. And some of them are people who I would highly respect and take their opinion on anything. And some of them are people who I just wouldn't listen to in any facet of my life. And you don't know which one of those people is making these comments. So it's probably best just to ignore it and move on with your life.
I gotta say, I'm disappointed in that very mature and measured method of dealing with social media, because I am notoriously one of the most petty, unhinged, insecure people when it comes to the comments. It's something I own 100%. And part of me is like, I like being argumentative too. It's part of my personality that I didn't lean into until I was a bit older. When I was younger, I think I was a bit scared too. But there's something that's borderline, I don't want to say I dissociate, but it gets into that, like, I imagine a fighter before they put on gloves and get in the ring, except just much, much, much less epic. And, but the fact is, like, this thing, which every study on it, the people that engineered it, social media, will tell you it's built to leech off of your mental health and to make your living in it and just immerse yourself in it, puts you directly with, and it's almost like that's your reward for being good, is like more people coming to chip away, that's part of it. But to have some type of heuristic to follow that allows you to keep your sanity while also being perceived as better, I guess, in the eyes of everybody, that's such an important thing. And as of right now, I don't think there's any like safety how-to manual for how to navigate social media without losing your mind. But it is kind of refreshing to hear that A, you didn't used to be that way, and that B, you found kind of a principled approach that took you to where you could kind of just let it roll off your shoulders without feeling the need to defend yourself at every given time. And I'd also say I was actually very surprised, and pleasantly so, when you did reach out, because I talk my fair share of shit. I mean, in public figures with sports commentary and whatever. And I'd never say anything. People often say like, "Oh, you wouldn't say it to your face." And it's like, I don't know. Like, how much pre-workout do I have in me? We'll see. But I think that's important because we're in a sport where there's a lot of big, scary strongmen walking around. And it feels like there's a lot of punches being pulled, or people can sometimes be hesitant, I think, to vocalize what they think. Do you get any of that at all, or not so much?
Yeah, it's. I think I've had such a unique rise in the sport, and it's been. Everyone's had a perception of it. If you have someone who's been in the sport 4 or 5 years, you see them slowly climb up the ranks. That person is sort of digested, like, okay, well, someone has to get to the top and rise and win, and cool, and they've put in their hard yards. I noticed very much in the early days when I was sort of like the new guy, it was very exciting to all the competitors, and I really sensed that. And then as I started to sort of do better and better, and I'm sort of unapologetically myself. I'm going to put stuff on YouTube. I'm going to talk. It's in my nature as well to talk shit and to stir up the pot a little bit and whatever. I will often, if I put a controversial video out, I'll text the person who I'm making it about, go like, hey, just so you know, this is coming out. It's nothing personal, all good, whatever. But over time, I started doing better, and there was sort of like a lull in my popularity within the sport in terms of like the people involved. Ultimately, you're taking their paycheck, you're taking the trophies they want to win. They're not going to be as happy for you as they would be for themselves. Of course, that's human nature. But over time, I think it's been accepted a little bit more. And I'm at the point in the sport where, yeah, there's a lot of passive aggressiveness. There's other pro strongmen who have me blocked on social media. I could not tell you why. I have no explanation for it. And it is strange because in person, there are very few things that people will say. And when they do say it, it's never often backed up with any sort of conversation if you ask them about it. And on the flip side, there's always fans trying to start shit and talk shit and try to get things going. And often the guys at the top, we're not aggressive people. We don't want confrontation. We're this big and we lift weights and stones and stuff because we don't want to fight. We chose not to fight. But yeah, it's been interesting for me, and it's really just pulled me in and said, you know what? I've got my family, I've got my team who I care about, I've got people who I care about, who I need to take care of, and then I have fans who love me and think that everything I do is great, and they are wrong, and the people who think everything I do is shit are also wrong, and so you just have to be really comfortable in yourself, and it gets back to if this person wasn't in Strongman, would they be someone who I would respect, who I would value their opinion, who I would listen to? And frankly, the answer is often no. And that applies to the pro strongmen. It applies to some of the fans. It applies to quite a number of people going, you know what? The things that are important to me are not always important to other people. And if they're not really going to understand where you're coming from. And don't make them. Don't try, So I'm happy to go about my way and take care of my family and be very open and vocal about what's important to me. However that sits with people is how it sits with people.
And I find people, or I would intuit anyways, that people have a better time in the sport, but also have a better time transitioning out of it, which happens to everybody eventually, unless they decide to stay in the Masters forever and live on a permabulk.
Yeah.
Which is probably one of the most unhealthiest things to ever happen to strongman, is the creation of the Masters heavyweight division. But if you're able to start with kind of that grounded position, it's like anybody who gets into something like this to be okay was never going to be okay. But if you start with those kind of foundational principles of what's important to you, you know why you're doing this. One of the things I credit you with, and I'll go to bat, I think I get quite a lot of shit about this, is when I'm lenient on people who do things for financial reasons, because there's a lot of purists out in the community that think if you ever do anything for personal gain, you must be a grifter and you're selling out the spirit of the sport. As if strongmen should uniquely destroy their bodies for decades, without having anything to show for it, because I think your video was cringy or something. Yeah. But it's so easy to make that maneuver and say, my livelihood, and, doing it in obviously a way that has integrity associated with it, but my livelihood is exponentially important than whatever record I'm going to set. And that just allows you to maneuver so much in a way that is authentic and isn't going to expose you to all of the bullshit that might wound you if you were otherwise overly attached to it.
Yeah, and it that applies in droves to a lot of things. I don't construct my life to have the top strongman performance ever. And so me and say like a Brian Shaw would be totally juxtaposed with something like this, where yeah, this year I've made the call that the month before shows I'm not going to travel. I'm just going to shut it down and I'm going to train and focus and whatnot. But that being said, I spent nearly all of January away from my house. I spent half of December away from home, and if you keep in context why you're doing it in the first place, I don't need the bravado and the chest pound to say that I'm the strongest human on the planet or the strongest person who ever lived. I think it's a generally interesting conversation, but it's certainly nothing where I'm going to be on my deathbed thinking that that's what I'm really have accomplished and given to the world. And right now, I have employees and family to take care of and business to run. And one of my largest paranoias is what's going to happen after career and how do we keep these things going. And so I will do social media trips at inopportune times when I could be preparing for competition. But if you understand that that is going to be more towards my goal of creating a fulfilling life for me and the people I care about, and even if you lose a placing at a show, it still works out that that was a better thing to do. Eventually, you get to a point where, okay, and this is my ultimate goal, is strongman is just not something that going and competing 10 times a year is something that I should be doing because I have other things that I should be doing. And to me, that's a really nice natural transition rather than I tried to make as much money as possible by competing in competition earnings until my body broke and now I have no idea what to do. And unfortunately, strongman isn't a sport that's going to pay you full time unless you're someone named Mitchell Hooper over the past 12 months. I did a little thing. If you win every single strongman show, you make about 650,000. That's giants in the big four. 650,000 a year. You come fifth in all those shows, you make 50 grand a year. You might as well just go be a bouncer or something like that. A big guy could do, and you're going to be just the same. But every strongman has tens of thousands in the pro division. Has tens of thousands of like customers right there ready to consume what they have to offer. And if you can provide things of value to people, then you're making their lives better. You're making money. And this is what I love about a capitalist society. No one's paying you $1 that they don't want to pay you. You're not getting an unjust paycheck from anyone. So if you're making a lot of money, you're providing a lot of value to other people in one way or another. And so I just prefer to focus on how can I provide value to people and really, in a way, justify my self-worth, which is something that I've struggled with for a very long time. And how can I give more to the world than I take from it? And as much as the strongman sphere has helped me in reaching tons and tons of people be able to do that, I have also disproportionately benefited more than any person in the history of strongman in nearly every sense of the word. And so that's probably my largest internal existential battle is how can I give back more than I take when every time I try to give back, I receive so much.
Yes. To touch on the comment about the beauty of capitalism, amen. That provided a very, very important workaround for the sport because social media did come around. So strongman didn't have to wait for like a Vince McMahon type to come around and turn it into something that went from being this kind of niche freak show that would be aired on Christmas every year into something that would fill stadiums. Social media did that, and it didn't make it so that pro strongmen had to wait for that organization to get any type of paycheck, and it was just going to be for the ones that were crazy and would kill themselves for it anyways. You have an audience now, and in that way, so the double-edged sword of social media, it's probably toxic for society in ways we can't even begin to fathom quite yet, but it does allow people that really have anything of interest, anything of value, to immediately meet up with people and provide it. So I think that's kind of an interesting part of the historical curve of strongman coming to where it is. But to your comment about feeling like you're somehow taking more than you give back, I've come to kind of see this, that you're very hard on yourself. That you and I think, I value that in people more so than people that are too lenient on themselves, because if you have to pick one or the other, people are almost always, we're flawed. If you're a Christian, you think we're all sinners. If you're an atheist, you think we're stupid primates. So it's lose-lose either way. But I appreciate that when people have that kind of gleam, because it's those types of standards that we set that keep us on the straight and narrow and reaching higher and higher. Although it does plant that kind of internal conflict in us and I felt that a little bit. Like, I don't have a fraction of the accomplishments that you do. I'm the mediocrest of strongmen, yet I've been able to have my wife stay home and take care of our child, where she has a master's degree. She's more educated than I am. I've been able to benefit so much. It's like, God, really? Like, am I giving something that earns me this thing that I have? It's impossible not to be grateful. And maybe also wonder if the system's a little fucked up, but I don't know what the workaround to that is.
Yeah. I think we have children of similar age, and it really changed my perspective on the world when she was born. And thinking about the ordinary person and how they make ends meet and how they buy a house and how they do the things that normal people should be able to do. And it's really difficult. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is I'm afforded luxuries, and other people who are buying my merchandise and programs and coming to the shows, and they put so much out to be able to do that, to get a little bit of joy. I just hope that I provide them that joy in return. And that's why I will never be at a show not giving 100% unless the show is said and done for me. If I can go out and do something special and I can prepare hard for the show, that's to me the biggest thank you that I can give. But on one hand, to just get a little bit more philosophical, I've thought about this quite a lot, for better or for worse. On one hand, if you're very hard on yourself, then you can struggle with self-esteem in a way, which, if you follow me, you know that that's not really something that I struggle with. It's more of a contribution versus reception. But one of the worst things to happen, I think, to the world is this self-esteem movement, where you should feel good about yourself regardless of what you do. I think you should feel good about yourself because of what you do, and that should inspire you to do other great things, to continue feeling great about yourself. And so whilst I agree with you, I'm hard on myself, I'm quite happy for that, because I think that's driven me to do as many things as I have. And hopefully with declining testosterone for a number of reasons over the next 10 years or so, that I'll probably chill out a little bit.
Yeah, there's certain things that exacerbate the certain predispositions that I think most people can attest to. But hey, it just makes your coping mechanisms that much more ironclad. So, and I agree with you completely about that. And I mean, I know you're in Canada, and I don't want to pretend to know what Canada's like. I just have, media, cartoonish representations depending on where you watch. I grew up in California, which is like the Canada of the United States. So, we actually had to bounce and move to Texas because, and you've mentioned housing prices. My wife was a supervisor of social work for Riverside County. I had a pretty successful gym and was already starting to do YouTube stuff. We couldn't afford to get a house. We were in a 1-bedroom apartment in the middle of COVID. And you can kind of look at it chicken or egg, because unfortunately we lived in that hellscape that I hope falls into the ocean that was so hostile we couldn't live there. Right. But on the other hand, we did live in a place where there was enough competition and there was enough real estate where we could travel very easily a little bit to the east and live very well. So it's like wherever there's, it's kind of effed up. If you have the right mentality, there's also an opportunity. And it's almost like a glass is half full or empty kind of thing where you decide to settle on. It's probably similarly so with where you decide to settle on with your sense of contribution. But self-esteem, I mean, I can remember so clearly the self-esteem lessons we got in like 4th grade, 5th grade. It was like mandatory assemblies just regularly telling you about this thing. And when you're a confused kid, and kids, you're not going to feel good about anything for like 15 years of your life because everything's so chaotic and all over the place. And they're telling you like, no, you should feel good. Then it's almost like there's something wrong with me because I can't make myself feel good. When in reality, it's like, well, you're dependent on your parents. You're not good socially. There's a bunch of things that you still need to grow into. Maybe let's focus on those processes, give you something to feel good about. And then you have, the proverbial learn to fish that's going to set you up for the rest of your life.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And it if we want to just draw this parallel back to strongman and people competing in strongman, the one of the big self-esteem things is people looking at a local contest and they're going, should I compete for the first time? And they're sort of evaluating, like, well, am I going to win? Like, can I smash every single weight and can I get multiple reps? Can I do this? Where that's not even what there is to be proud about. Like, what there is to be proud about in strength sports is your commitment to achieving whatever you can achieve and to the process. And that's the advice that I give probably most often is stop worrying about what this end result is, this under 22 elephant bar world record on a Tuesday with Converse on, and worry more about like follow the training plan to get you there. And if you follow the training plan, then cool. And then you can totally remove all the pressure from yourself and be proud of that person that you're being on the way to becoming whatever strength athlete you want to be. I think that's a major barrier for people that we should do our best to try to break down.
I think that's spot on. I've said this kind of bizarre thing over and over and over. I'm always relating strength sports and lifting stuff to like martial arts because I think there's a lot of parallels in the way training goes and the type of commitment, and even when you're trying to like apply science or evidence to it or whatever, is it art or is it science, etc. But the one thing that I think would just vastly improve the quality of lifters you get as well as their quality of life is if there was some type of like onboarding system that was more like an organized dojo or something with belts or whatever, where you would kind of learn that type of humility and that type of, put the process before the outcome. What are you doing thinking about winning? You're fantasizing, you're daydreaming, you haven't done anything, you don't know your ABCs, you don't know how to wipe your own ass, but you're over here thinking about getting on a podium. Yeah. Where learning how to focus on the process, it becomes a joy for the sake of it. One, it's something that keeps people sane. That's why people need work in their life, but also it connects you to the things that continuously feed and nourish you, which is absolutely irreplaceable. You can't replace that with drugs. You can't replace that with any type of future society you can think of. And it's like lifting does so much of that so well already, but it's unfortunate that so many people seem to miss the boat, again, especially with social media kind of steering people to the biggest and highest performers. So on that note, as somebody, and you're right, I think we did have our first children right around the same time. You have a daughter?
Yeah.
Congrats, by the way. The life-changing, no?
It's so good. Yeah, she's got her first birthday in, what are we in? We're in 8 days is her first birthday.
You got a big shindig plan? Just everybody coming to watch?
Yeah, we've got so much support and so many people who love her. We're very, very lucky. And as babies go, they're not. I don't think any of them are easy, but she's certainly on the easier side. She's a blessing, and my wife has done so well. And I think oftentimes the joy of the man and the child is dictated mostly by how the wife handles it. And she's an absolute rock star. And it's been incredible. If you asked me when I was 15. What do you want to do when you grow up? I would have told you I wanted to run business and be a dad. Like that's all I wanted to do. And so I'm so thankful and so grateful because we do things that make it totally possible that you might not be able to have kids. So your life is absolutely never the same afterwards in the best way possible.
Yeah, they try to tell you, like everybody tries to tell you, but you don't know until you're in it. So being in this new role on top of everything else you do that nobody really has any comprehension of how you do it and fit it all into a day. But you also have a child in this role as a father, which is obviously principally very important to you. You seem to have philosophical takes, kind of ideas about kind of the way the world should be or the way people should operate in the world to achieve some type of, I don't want to say enlightenment, but some better state of being. What are your thoughts at this point into fatherhood about kind of navigating that with a child that you're now like responsible for imprinting all of that onto?
It's such a big responsibility, and it feels so delicate when you think about all your childhood memories and how much weight you put behind those and thinking that you develop all of those for someone else. And it's a very difficult juxtaposition between like, you have to provide for a baby. And I think like my nature is probably more to providing than the other side, which is actually being there for them and actually being present and enjoying their company. And if someone tries to consume all the content that I make and think about all the things that I do, you're still going to miss half of the things in my day. So it gets really, really overwhelming. And on one side, it's really nice because there's nothing that shuts all of that off faster than just like seeing her laugh or playing with her, watching her try and walk around. But on the flip side, sometimes it is difficult to be able to create that time to do it, and that's just the struggle of things. I'm sort of I've got this theory of if I sprint for the next 5 to 7 years in terms of work and business, then I'll be able to give everything over to my family afterwards. But then I've started to reevaluate, and you think, well, in the first few years of a child's life, according to developmental research, that's paramount for you to be there and be present. Well, so then maybe that's a bit of a bad idea. And then maybe in 7 years' time, when she's finally learning how the world works, well, if I did everything perfectly and we have all these things and we're good forever and investments, and I really do nothing day to day, well, I'm going to become a person that she doesn't respect a whole lot because we just have a lot of things and dad's a bit of a loser who hangs out in the hot tub. So it's made me think about life in a completely different way. And really it's one day at a time and doing my best to try to manage all of the different things. I just have too many people that I care about so much that I don't have time for all of them. I would do anything for my family. I'd do anything for my employees. And I do my best to show that on a regular basis. And often that pulls me away from working and doing things to try to help people out. And you only have so much water in the bucket that if you start pouring it in places, you don't have enough left over. And so, we had our first family vacation in about 3 years. In December, we went to Disney. My wife ran the marathon there. We were up with Peyton at 3 a.m, taking her out there, and we were watching. And I think that the best thing that I can try to put into myself, and I can't really give advice to anyone else because you don't know if you're doing the right thing as a parent the first time, is that the smaller amounts of time that I can get with her, I try to make as intentional as possible. I dance with her in the kitchen every single day. I say goodnight to her every single night, and that's sort of our special thing is when I'm home and I can put her to bed, I do that by myself and having that one-on-one time. I also make it intentional. Like something I love to do is go get groceries. I'm not sure why. I think it's just a simple thing. And being able to have this time where I can just go with her and go get groceries and have independent time, that's really special as well. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's sort of my joy as a father.
No, you did. It was exceptionally vague because I don't even know how to drill down appropriately on that question. But it's something that I just wanted to siphon off whatever insight I could get. My son Theodore he just turned a year, and we went back home.
Yeah.
And watching the steps as he's gotten older. I mean, for the last, I don't know, probably since around 5 or 6 months, he's at that point where it's like, oh, he's aware of things and he can engage with things. And there's just like this, I mean, in the beginning, it's like, to be crude, it's like taking care of a plant. And then,
Yeah.
you're interacting with them as much as you can. But there's this point where like the brain kind of turns on and they're like, oh, there's things around. And then there's this exponential ability to engage. And then the joy, and I know, like you said, your wife's a stud. I'm extraordinarily fortunate to have a wife who's able to transition from being a career woman to staying at home and who wanted to do that. But we get the joy of being at home and having all of those moments together. But it's like every time I can get him to see something new or to like be excited about something or even to laugh. Like I never thought like baby laughs would have done anything to me, but it's like the best thing in the world when that happens to you. And then, you just hope that if you're there and if you are the person you think you are, that stuff, I mean, it should leak out, right? It should almost be like osmosis. But the best thing you can do is just, I think, be in the room as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm with you. Be in the room and try to not be on your phone and try to not be on social media and engage. And it's the baby laughs and the giggles, and man, that feels better than any lift, any record, any trophy, anything. And I think just to get back to sort of, you said I have like philosophies on how people should live. My overarching thing is just too many people are focused on being happy, and being happy is not the answer to anything, because I always say if I wanted to be happy, I would just stay in bed, eat fast food all day, and masturbate probably 15 times a day. And that would be it. That would be my whole day. And I think instead of happiness, you chase joy. And I think a lot of people in sort of our generation, They chase this happiness, and if you're chasing happiness, there's no need. You shouldn't get married, and you shouldn't have a kid if you want to be happy on a day-to-day basis. Because as soon as someone bothers you, just like slough them off to the next person who's not going to bother you. But true joy is so much more worthwhile chasing, and that absolutely involves creating a family.
Absolutely. I agree with that. There's people that'll say like, well, I'm not the type. And I don't know, maybe that's a thing, but I think everybody is kind of, I don't know. I think it's like, I'm not the type to eat veggies or whatever. It's like, I mean, everybody is kind of the type, it's just your brain gives priorities to things and maybe is better or worse at times to gauging what should get priorities. It's, the distinction you put out between joy and happiness, and it's like one of the many failings of language that keeps us stuck in talking over each other's heads, because it's such a simple idea. The idea of your impulse and instinct and what makes your brain light up now, like an addict who, whether you got dropped in a casino or looking at a line of Coke or whatever, or the satisfaction, the deeper feelings of purpose and meaning that you get because you did something that is so substantive that it allowed you to feel that. Mm-hmm. And when you chart the journey that takes you to that thing, which you can't fake, you can't get it from any type of short-term distraction, it has to be earned the real way. And you see all the shit, it's the hero's journey. You see all the shit that you have to do to get to, I don't know, the treasure at the end or whatever. And there are no shortcuts. It has to be done the hard way. And that means getting up multiple times a night when you have a newborn, or it means taking your lumps in sports and getting knocked ass over tin can every time until you finally get your shit together and level your game up. It's all of these things that incrementally increase. And people, in my opinion, and I know this was for me when I was younger, because I had to learn these kind of the hard way, that association with that is, I think, what people are missing, that they have to be taught that you can associate that pain and that discomfort with the thing at the end, to the point where you almost like the process, or you do like the process, because you know what it represents, even if you don't get the thing at the end. And I can't imagine a life that does have joy that is disconnected from that.
Yeah, and look, it's not to say that everyone has to have children, but creating a family could be a family of friends, a family of things where you volunteer, whatever it is. But it's certainly the joy thing is certainly something that seems to have been lost. And frankly, if back to self-esteem, if you should always feel good about yourself, well, then you should always be happy. And then we're into this the worst negative spiral I can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And to dig a little bit deeper, and I do want to move back onto some strongman stuff, but while we're on this topic, you've been vocal in the past on your upbringing, mental health, and so on, your relationship with your stepdad and how that kind of formed things going on. I relate to that in spades because I haven't talked to my dad since I was 16. We had kind of a chaotic upbringing, and I feel like that had some roundabout way where I kind of had that draw towards wanting to be a father myself. Kind of, this is something essential that was skipped the last time around, and I don't know, this chain needs to be broken or what have you. How do you kind of evaluate the things that have had so much of an impact on, let's say, your training or competitiveness? Those early kind of childhood experiences and the most important developmental years through your early age and through your teens. In what ways do you kind of see that as either motivation, lessons? How do you kind of take that forward into being a better father?
Well, ultimately, I think that it really boils down to there are people who believe that the world happens to them, and there are people that believe that they happen to the world. And in growing up, for people who don't know my background as much, my parents split when I was really young. I had a stepdad in the picture for a handful of years who then abruptly left and never saw anything of him again. I would say my mom was a single mom for all intents and purposes for a majority of my childhood. And in that, you can't be one parent and do the job of two. And I think the best way to put it is I had a fantastic caretaker and I never wanted for anything. But I didn't have as much direction. I didn't get grounded, and it was not because I behaved well. It was just sort of like we were all trying to get by. And I think as a parent, I see that now more than ever, and I have more sympathy for maybe an imperfect upbringing as much as anyone, but that everyone's doing their best, and my parents absolutely fit in that category. But carrying that stuff through as a father is every situation has advantages to it. And so let's say my situation where I didn't have that strong guidance of right and wrong, that now makes me as an adult, I never really saw consequences as a kid, and that's made me really unafraid to make mistakes and do something that I shouldn't do, or do something a different way, or anything. I operate that way in my every element of my life. If there's a line of 10 people to one line at the grocery store, I'm going to figure out why this one's empty, and I'm just going to take this one. I just always have the counter to everyone else, just trying to find the simplest way, easiest way to do things, and have little reverence for how things are supposed to be done. Certainly, that's been a massive advantage in Strongman. But in terms of becoming a dad and teaching a kid, well, you can go, there are ways in which other people do things, and there are ways in which you can do things. And ultimately, you have to be best at connecting with other people and talking to other people. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be athletic. You don't really have to be anything other than easy to get along with. And according to the research, that's what's most correlated to your success long term. And so when there's a bad grade at school, when they get in trouble for something, for speaking out, for making someone laugh, always contextualizing that as, okay, well, are we harming people? Are we having a difficult time forming relationships? Or are you just being a bit of a pain in the ass? If you're being a bit of a pain in the ass, I was the king of that. It's okay. Let's not do that because it disrupts the class. But really going, okay, the most important things that we can emphasize are those interpersonal relationships. And I've in hindsight learned that that's the first, honestly, I would say 18 years of your life are dedicated towards how can we structure things in a way where you have friends and you want to talk to people and you know how to have a close friend and you know how to say something that someone doesn't want to hear in a respectful, polite manner. All of those things, to me, exponentially more important than your geography skills or your history skills or really anything else that you learn at school, aside from maybe reading and writing, which, again, it's just forms of communication. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing that I want to pass on, and that's the direction that I want to give that I probably wasn't given that much growing up.
The relationship of those skills is skills that kind of form the rest of our life and our ability to function, being so far above what we actually focus on in school. Like that really hits home because I remember, so a little bit of 30 seconds of my backstory. My father was a psychiatrist, had kind of a big mental health and addiction meltdown at some point, and then kind of went off and did his own thing. But for this weird gray area, we ended up in kind of addiction counseling, which is probably one of the most transformative things I've ever done in my entire life. Me and my mom every week would go to this group, and it was the other wives of doctors, so it was a little privilege, but it's another example of something you get access to that so many people should get access to, but don't for whatever reason. And I was like 13, I think, when I went through that. And it was right at that age where you kind of learn how to smell bullshit or how to relate to dysfunction or, how to look at yourself. Anyways, but I thought so often from that point on, like, why am I paying attention to any of this other shit that goes on in school that everybody spends so much time, every time there's a cut or it's like, no, the music program. And I'm like, nobody knows what credit is. Nobody knows how to interview for a job. No. Nobody knows how to form basic personal relationships and have boundaries and not give in to like codependency or enabling or impulsive behavior or so on. And like, I just imagined like what it would do to society if that type of work represented like, 20% of schoolwork, where it's like, hey, these are the pillars of, it's like, okay, you can do calculus or you can figure out how to be a good human being in society. And I feel like so much of, anyways, I'm going on my social political rant, but it's like so much of society would just be cleansed, disinfected if you get to the bottom of so many of those dysfunctional problems that just keep giving and giving and giving generation to generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole school system being broken is something that we could probably talk about for a long time in a lot of different ways. But ultimately, when she comes home from school, regardless of what tests that she has or results she has or exam, I'll be asking how recess went first every single time and who did you talk to and whatever, because if you have a broad group of friends, and curiosity is probably the other thing that I've always been really strong with. And it's annoyed nearly every single teacher I have, even though they're supposed to develop curious children. They really don't foster that or accept that or acknowledge that. If you have a broad group of friends and you're very curious and you're confident enough to ask the parents questions, you're going to learn all those things pretty quickly, because you'll run across a lawyer or an accountant or a business owner, a variety of people, and that's really how you become well-rounded, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Probably the sole reason we're considering public school. We were like, oh, our precious little baby will homeschool or whatever, stupid thoughts you have as a parent. But it's like, no, there has to be that integration to other kids, and the value of that social development is huge. So I think this is a good point to weave back on track to some more strongman related things. I mean, I could talk for like 5 hours about this stuff, but I guess I should consider our audience.
Yeah, we'll save that for when our paths cross in the future.
So you got the Arnold Classic coming up. Forever, it's been the heaviest show on earth. After Shaw's show, I'm not sure we can call it that anymore.
No.
And I've heard you say multiple times how that show absolutely chewed you up, which that doesn't even make sense to me, because when I feel chewed up, it's like I'm not deadlifting for 6 weeks. It's like I got separated joints and strains, and I just need to bathe in ibuprofen. But the fact that you went through that thing that just annihilated the best athletes in the world, you yourself got tore up, and then on the back end of it, it's like, well, right back to work. Hey, let's do a 200 rep squat challenge. And it's like the things that you jump into. Yeah. It's absolutely insane. But before we get into the Arnold, just give me a little overview of your experience at Shaw's show with just the stupidly heavy, bone crushing weights.
In every show, there's areas of relief. World's Strongest Man, you got a loading medley. Like, at least it's different, right? There's something different about it. Say at the Arnold this year, we've got, max deadlift, cool, that'll be heavy. Then we have the overhead medley, which is heavy, but it'll be a bit paced out. Then you've got like a max explosive lift, and then you got a stone to shoulder, which is sort of more technical, a little bit more funny. So you have these things where you're like, not everything is going central nervous system 10 out of 10. At Shaw, my God. I mean, so we start with max deadlift, 3 attempts, calibrated plates. So you don't get any action in the bar either. It's not fun. It's not cool. All right, cool. We're done that. Then you go to a medley, which the show is sort of based off of Fortissimus. He's got a lot of reverence for that. Like, everything here was heavier than at Fortissimus. This was a very similar one that had been run, but he just made it heavier, and you're looking at it, and in that medley, it finished with a 190 kilo axle, I believe. Or, sorry, a 200 log. I think it was a 185 axle, a 200 log, something like that. It was finishing heavier than guys were attempting for max at World's Strongest Man final with the max axle. You go, holy shit, and you're doing that right after a max deadlift. And then on paper, you're like, okay, things might chill out a little bit, because a wheelbarrow into arm over arm, it should be okay. And then the arm over arm is impossible. Like, it is the heaviest thing I've ever pulled. So you tear up your hands. Then keg toss, like, okay, that'll be fine. But then after all of those events, then a maximal ballistic effort, you're like, okay, and that's just the first day. And so it's just like no effort, no let up whatsoever, just relentless time and time again. You've got a squat that 10 of 16 guys failed. You've got Atlas stones, essentially for max, where there's a lot of personal responsibility that has to be had on how many fails there were in that event. But half of the field failed. You add up all of the zeros, you're talking 30 plus zeros from the 16 strongest men in the world who can't even complete the first rep, the first attempt of an event. It's insane. The other additional thing that people don't realize about Shaw is you've got the competition arena, and right beside you've got the hotel. So even if fans aren't trying to be weird, like, that's the normal hotel to stay in, and that's where we are. So from the second you leave your hotel room all the way through competition to the second you go back in your hotel room, there's always someone talking to you about something. And the fans are who pays our bills, and they deserve our time and attention for sure. But having no downtime is really difficult. And so for someone like me, someone like Thor, it's an added pressure and added challenge where some of the newer guys might not get interrupted or bothered as much, but you can't eat breakfast by yourself. You can't have a lunch or dinner by yourself. You can't do anything other than interact with people all day. So it's not just the physical side, it's the psychological side as well. And that show will forever be, in my eyes, the most difficult.
I mean, it was evident to anybody who watched it. Like to watch the people struggle that you don't see struggle. I'm torn on how to perceive shows that go off like that, because the selfish fan in me gets super excited when everybody zeros, because there is, and I remember getting into arguments with people on the forums like 20 years ago, like back when the Morande Muscle Forum was up. Because there were guys like, well, if I'm sitting in the stands watching a beer or drinking a beer, watching the show, I think, zeros are boring. And I'm like, I think watching everybody get reps is boring. Like, I remember being at the Arnold when I was, back when Z was competing. I was here, Marius threw the weight for height into the audience, which was fun to watch in person. But Z is like coming up to like his peak. And I remember watching everybody get their shit pushed in, pardon my language, with the Apollon's wheels or Apollon's wheels, and Z coming in and just making it look like a plastic toy. And it's like, you never see anything that electric, but it's predicated on the pain and suffering of everybody else who's breaking themselves to try to do this thing. And that kind of brings me to like, it's one thing to have things to appease the fans, but every event can't be that way. So then I think about responsibility, and it seems like there is a push right now, not just in the pro divisions, but the middleweight classes and the women's divisions, I'm sure, are seeing this as well, of more events, heavier events, chasing world records, and kind of demanding that athletes be ready for anything at any time without really an actual peak. And it's like, anyway, so what do you think about that as far as contributing to the risk or like responsibility of the promoters to not chew up the athletes because you should just be ready to go into the meat grinder?
Yeah, it's hard because none of the promoters talk to each other. So whilst we say Strongest Man on Earth is the heaviest show, and Brian's declaring that, and it works out nicely that Worlds is generally a little bit more dynamic, as is the Invitational, no one's telling them they have to be. So if we had that Shaw show, and then we had Rogue, who decided to be really heavy as well, you're going to have a lot of guys get destroyed. It's difficult. Do you want guys to compete a lot, or do you want us to lift the heaviest weights every time you see us? And I think most people would tend to say we want you to compete a lot. We want the opportunity to watch this and for it to be entertaining and engaging. And so, yeah... The difficult part is I'm a huge personal responsibility guy. It's on yourself. If you don't like the look of a show, you think it's too heavy, you think there's too much, don't do it. No one's forcing you to do it. On the flip side, it's not a sport where you're making $100,000 to come fifth at World's Strongest Man. Like you can earn your money and get out. You sort of have to be there regularly if you're relying on that. And so there is a line of exploitation if you're forcing people to do things that you know are probably going to get them hurt. So that's the difficult line. I would also draw a massive distinction between people like me who are doing it for a living professionally, who are getting paid, who are getting trips paid for and accommodated and everything, versus middleweight. You're doing it for fun. The best thing that possibly happens is that you cover your travel expenses. The promoter, in my opinion, has a substantial responsibility to make sure that they're doing things reasonably and safely for non-professional divisions. Because these guys and girls, they got to go back to fucking doing HVAC or being an accountant or whatever. You can't have your muscles blown out for that.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm starting to see more now as things pick up. Like I heard Diefenbaugh and Morehouse talking about, the Strongman Corp and like kind of OSG takeover and the stuff they're doing there. And a comment was made to the effect of like, well, you can't be a pro strongman anymore and have a full peak, right? Like you got to be ready to go. So it's you need to be there to earn the money, but it seems like you also need to be there to not get looked over next time. So you actually keep your foot there to begin with. And then I'm looking at these events that they're coming out with. Okay, like they had one I just saw. It's what used to be Clash on the Coast. Before that, shockingly, had a change of hands. And then I forget what it's called now, but it's. I'm sorry.
It's not Chaos, is it? That's the UK one.
No, it's is it PFL or it's like Pro Strongman League? I don't remember. It's a series of letters, yeah. But it's in the same vein. but this year they showed us what, or Tim, the guy that runs heavy metal where I train at, showed me the list, and it's 10 events, and it looks like it wants to be Shaw 2.0. It's max axle, a heavy squat, max deadlift, multiple max events, and there's 10 events, and they're all heavy. And
Yeah.
I'm like, who's going to watch this? I mean, nobody wants to watch 10 highlight reels, let alone the full thing. Nobody wants to compete in this. And then it's like your success hinges on people who are literally, like every show I've gone to, it's a couple grand in the hole. It's just, it is what it is. It's fun.
Yeah.
I can afford to do it. It's cool. Nobody's getting paid. We're just like, the best we could do is like, social media or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like on the one hand, pushing the sport forward is cool. But on the other hand, I don't know what the supreme volume is really doing for anybody.
Yeah, and the biggest mistake I think that's happening in strongman when we talk about growing the sport, which by the way, I'm very much with you. Why do we not have more reverence for how much it's grown? It is accelerating at this insane, massive rate. Anyway, the biggest mistake I think promoters are making is thinking that the sport is going to grow by getting people to watch. The sport's going to grow by getting people to participate. And by making these shows that are incredibly unappealing to participate in, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So, yep, at the pro level, sure, it shouldn't look welcoming. It shouldn't look like other people can do it because that's the whole point. But at the local level, not everything has to be a skill to become the world's strongest man. It can just be a fun show. It can just be a cool parking lot show. It can just be a cool show in a little stadium in North Carolina, whatever. And inspire people to want to do that and join. And that's it. And it gets to the whole world record chasing, which I've done some of in the past because I think it's cool to do something no one's ever done before. But my controversial take, maybe it's controversial, I don't think it is. The only real records that matter are what's the heaviest weight a human being has deadlifted, log pressed, or axle pressed. Other than that, you're like the different stone diameters and different conditions and different tacky and different body weight and different caveats on age and blah, 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 blah. The more caveats we put on things, the less anyone cares. So let's stop chasing these records that no one really cares about, and let's just empower people to be able to participate in droves. And then the ones who are really, really high quality, they're going to make it through to the pros. They're going to make it through to things where they will get destroyed eventually. But you don't need to be destroyed at a local show to parse out who might be good at a higher level.
Yeah. And I mean, I think they're leaving so much on the table. I think there's a problem with lack of creativity in some of these sports because strongman has a problem that like CrossFit has where it's open-ended. So you can do anything. So people think, well, then we should do everything. And if you're in CrossFit, that's what you're paddle boarding or you're punting a football or something. And in strongman, you see people kind of reach and come up with some goofy stuff for the sake of being different or whatever. But it seems like the default move is if you want to get a buzz, it's weight, world record. And it's unfortunate because I think you're leaving a lot on the table for interesting ways you could get, because it is, the records are the records, but the meat is person versus person and you versus a field. And I think there's interesting ways you could get people to compete that would, further the sport as far as performance goes, but also, do what it needs to do to get people excited to participate and get people excited to tune in when it's time to tune in. But I could just see, it's like if you are sitting here with any amount of frustration on your breath from weight or things being difficult or it's like, what hope is there for the rest of us? You know what I mean? It's like, who else is better prepared for this stuff? You're like, God, this is brutal, bro. And I'm like,
Yeah.
geez, it's like, okay, maybe the pendulum's got to swing back a little bit. So would you, next year, I mean, let's say you look at the Shaw Classic and it's essentially the same list of events. I mean, you've called it the heaviest show. It's one I think you're the most proud of. Do you dive back in? And if you do you change anything about your approach to it?
I definitely dive back in. My personality, I don't do all the Giants live shows because I need the paycheck. So you can do the math. I'm cool. I'm good. What is not cool to me is someone else winning a show that I could be at and I'm fit enough to go compete in, and they didn't beat me. If someone beats me, great. Fair and square, cool. Tom, world's strongest man last year. Hats off. Deserved it 100%. But I just can't sit on my couch and watch someone win a title that I could be there contesting. So yes, I will go back for that reason. And as a person, I'm 100% into things or 100% out. So long as I'm in strongman, you're going to see me in a lot of places. In terms of preparing for it, I think I would prepare the same, but I would recover on the back end a little bit differently. Since you have this juxtaposition of strongest man on earth, of like the hardest show, heaviest show of the year, and then you've got the invitational, which is sort of the most demanding from a cardiovascular perspective, and definitely one of those shows where being strong enough is okay. I think I can be less paranoid about maintaining that strength over a few months. Go, you know what? Maybe the week after Shaw, like I actually do something relaxing for the first time in years. Maybe I go to the spa a couple of times. Maybe I make it a priority to go on some more walks because it'll be autumn in Canada and the leaves are changing color, and just prioritizing that stuff I think is going to be have to be a major change because everyone gets worn out, everyone gets burnt out, everyone gets less excited about lifting weight at times, yeah, I think that would be it. But I'm not operating in a way to keep myself in one piece for a long time. I'm operating in a way to be as successful as I can and have an exit plan before my body is destroyed.
That seems like the best potential strategy you could come up with, especially since you've successfully monetized everything. It's like even if you stop competing today, you still have a foot in the sport that could last indefinitely for as long as you're recording and collaborating and so on.
Yeah.
And that's a permanence that competing isn't going to get you. So, I mean, kudos for having a plan and for being able to establish that for yourself.
And it's from day one, and it's back to if you stand for nothing, nobody's going to love you. They might love to watch you compete, but they're not going to stick with you. I've got tons of plans for when I'm done competing. I probably have more plans when I'm done competing than I do while I'm competing. It's probably a bit of a chain, ball and chain on some of the business stuff, on some of the social media stuff that I want to do. But that's why I put my opinions out there that I know will be controversial. That's why I made a post when the thing blew up with Luke. Yeah, I was being called into question. Do I have to make a comment about that? No, not really. Is it my business? Not really. But I know more than a lot of people do. Okay, fine. I'm going to put it on myself to say my family is something that is incredibly important to me. And to me, that is the number one thing in the world. And some people are going to look and go, you're an asshole for saying anything. Fair enough. I totally get it. And some people are going to go, you know what? I'm a dad too, and that's the most important thing to me too, and I'm glad that someone is there who I can look up to. People always say don't meet your heroes, and the only reason I would say don't meet me is because I'm probably not as interesting as you think I am. Like, my favorite thing to do is just sit on the couch and play Spider Solitaire. Like, that's really fun in terms of like just downtime, alone time. But I want to portray myself to be someone who people can look up to in a way, and I can be authentic and I can be myself. And when I walk into the Arnold, there's no persona that I have to put on. And in that, I think then you gain loyal fans over a long period of time, not just the ones who want to see you deadlift max weight.
Very well said. So given those plans and given the strongest man on earth that we just covered, we're now in between with the Arnold Classic coming up. So I train at Heavy Metal Fitness. It's ran by just two of the best people you'll ever meet. Tim and Michelle are super warm and welcoming. That's where Andrade and Guardione both train, so I get to watch their prep and get some like behind the scenes as they're talking about what's going on and the changes. So that's like, I'm very privileged. But I was talking to Austin about the lineup and how he feels about it and so on. And I actually watched your recap and your predictions. This feels like an Arnold Classic that we have not seen in a very long time. And I want to know if you have the same sense about the talent there, or if it just kind of all bleeds together for you. And Austin himself was saying that it feels like it's back in the day when you had like Thor at his peak and Zydrunas and, the overlap of like the biggest guys in the field where there was quite a bit of uncertainty, even if you knew who kind of the best guy at the world was. I mean, I'm looking at the list. I mean, it's you, it's Thor, it's Trey, who's just big as shit right now and looks like he's on a tear. Kielszkowski, Hatton, who is a mutant, just doing insane things. And people that have been, and I mean, Singleton's looking ridiculous. Stoltman, like the list of people is kind of bananas. Do you feel any of that pressure, or do you feel confident enough about where you fall on that list?
Yeah, look, to just, I'll just be honest. That's just me. I've won 8 of the last 9 shows, and I've beat all these dudes on a regular basis. So yes, it feels like a really stacked lineup when you look at it on paper, and it is a deep field of athletes. I think this is probably the deepest strongman fields in terms of not this show, but generally speaking, that's ever existed, and that's a reflection of the popularity of the sport, I think. But if we look at last year's Arnold's, there was so much noise about how Thor's coming back full force. Alexi's now injury-free and back full force. Martins is back, and he's going to win it. Tom Stoltman is never going to perform poorly at an Arnold again. And Kieliszkowski is not injured now. And then you got Mitch, who's trying to defend his title. And it was the exact same conversation last year. And last year, I won by the largest margin of victory in Arnold history. So, is that a guarantee this year? Of course not. It's not a guarantee that I win. There's no guarantees in the sport until you lift the weight. That being said, I know that of all the guys who could do really well, there's going to be some percentage of them that turn up actually ready. And then there's going to be a percentage of those guys who turn up and actually execute. And after day one, you're going to see, okay, there are a few guys in contention to win. There are a couple of guys in contention to squeeze onto the podium. Cool, that's it. That's how these shows tend to work out. Could it be some dogfight with 5 people? Maybe in a strongman fan's hypothetical, beautiful world. But I don't think it's going to turn out that way. The one thing that I can that we can probably agree on, based on the history of the last 12 months, 24 months, Mitch Hooper will show up ready, and whoever else shows up ready will be along with me. And that's great. And I hope that's everyone. I hope everyone's in good shape. I hope we have a fight. I hope that we get the best out of each other. But ultimately, everyone can't come and have their best day. So I'm just in my lane. I'm focusing on my stuff. I'm confident that if I go and I do what I know I can do, I don't think that I can be beat right now. That being said, I don't think I'm immune to mistakes. I don't think I'm immune to injury. I don't think I'm immune to just throwing the log up and misgrooving it or whatever it may be. And I think I'm the only person in the field who can go in with that confidence. And I think that's a major advantage to me. And I'm not speaking to you because you agree with me on everything, so I'm happy to hear any counterpoint to that. But to me, that's how I read it.
So, I mean, I do agree with you. I mean, I even said I had to put my foot in my mouth because before Worlds, I was like, just give it to, that was the thumbnail. I think it was just give it to Mitch. And that was on the back, that was on the back end of other, criticisms I've made or whatever.
Yeah.
After, and you're right, anything can happen. And in a long enough career, it obviously will. And that's that's almost more interesting to me. It's not just that somebody wins because they're good. It's that they win without having a mistake because, mistakes happen. Anybody can be caught blinking. I do think you're going to be on top. I mean, I looked at your predictions. I mean, I'll run through them really quick. The video you put out, just ping pong off of it and then go in a little deeper. But you have the max elephant bar deadlift. Everybody's talking about a 501 raw from Thor. Maybe he'll be good for. I don't quite think he's there. It would be amazing to see, but we'll see. But you have Thor winning that, Trey right behind you in the mix, probably around third. Overhead gauntlet, stone to dumbbell to log. You mentioned everybody or a bunch of people missed the stone last time, which was bizarre. I was surprised to see.
Yeah.
Was there something different about that stone, by the way? Was there?
No, I don't know. There's nothing different about that stone to me. It didn't feel
it felt
that
good to you, right?
Felt fine. Yeah, it felt fine. I'm really not sure.
Okay, so it's just I think it's awkward. Maybe people get disoriented on a stage. I don't know, but it was weird to see that many people struggle. But you have the overhead gauntlet. Kieliszkowski's a monster. You, Hatton, monster overhead, probably top 3. Yep. Makes sense. Sound reasoning. Of course, people can wedge in there. Frame carry, the fastest guys, you, Thor, Kieliszkowski, Maxime. Like, you're in the mix on everything. And that's why, it's kind of become a phrase. You hoopered it. You place top 3 in everything, and that's infinitely more important than how many first places you have or whatever. You got the Timber Trial, which will be interesting, but the best carriers, you, Stoltman, Thor, Kieliszkowski, Atlas stone to shoulder. No tacky. That's interesting. Stoltman, Trey, Kieliszkowski, and you. And it's like, yeah, you're at the top of all those. the big jerk for Max, this is one thing I'm interested in. What's your projection, if you had to guess, the heaviest weight we're going to see? Because we got, I want to say today, Singleton posted a 550. You got Trey doing like jumps with like 700 pounds. Like the weight's going to get stupid. Do you think it's going to hover around the mid fives, or do you think anybody's going to break out?
Yeah, I think so. I think mid fives, 550 to 565 is probably what's going to win the event. There's a couple of details, and guys can listen to me if they want to or not. A lot of guys are working off of power bars. We're using an Olympic bar. That is not going to feel the same. Your dip and drive is going to be dramatically different. We've seen a lot of incredible performances on Instagram before that don't shake out to be true. That's something I pride myself on, is I show you basically what I'm going to do in the show. You can count on that. Yeah, it's, I'm impressed with how many guys are getting up past where I thought they would. If we look at the Flintstone lift at World's Strongest Man, we had all of the field except for 3 out at 213, and now it feels like a 210 is sort of like, cool, you came 7th or 8th. Ultimately on this, I think if you want to get really good points, you're talking probably at the 240 mark. And if you want to win the event, I think max lift is 255 to 260, right in that 560 range. And I'll be capable of that. Will I execute it? TBD. I think Lucas Hatton will be capable of that as well. But to think that much more than that is going up with a push press I think that's dreaming.
I'm inclined to agree with that. And you've seen, I mean, the best Olympic lifters in the world. I don't think I've ever seen anything over a 600. To bridge that gap was going to require a lot of strength, but also enough technique that probably a lot of guys don't necessarily have or train for.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple times, which I love because I think I can read in between the lines a little bit. The people that may or may not come in ready, of the people that come, a certain percentage are gonna do what they say. A lot of people, you said in the past, like to talk about winning, and then coming in and executing tends to be a different story. Do you find there's kind of a consistent group of people where you can kind of pinpoint that the rabble on Instagram is a little bit different than what you get on the contest show? Or do you just see a general kind of trend where you just tend to be more consistent than the field as a whole?
The best way that I could put it is the more times you hear someone saying how they're coming to win and going to smash everyone, the less likely that it is. Say like a Trey and Mateusz. When they post something on social media, it's something once every 3 weeks where you look and you're just like, oh, what just happened there? Yeah, okay, I know that's legit. But if you can sort of tell when things are being cherry picked, and I take all of it with a total grain of salt now. Without saying names, I know certain people will say that they're ready and they're not. Certain people will say that, watch out, it's a whole new version, and it's just not. And maybe one day it will be, but how many times can you cry wolf before, like, okay,
Yeah.
I say, and look, Tom has the capability to beat me. Of course, he beat me last year, but he also made a whole highlight reel about how good I am and how different it's going to be before the Rogue Invitational. It was the same. It was the same. And how many times am I going to go through people calling me out, either directly or indirectly, and then the same thing happens before I go like, okay, I'm just not going to listen to this. I just don't care. I know you're going to say this, so whatever.
Yeah. And I'm not going to corner you into naming names, but I will. Singleton is probably the worst offender when it comes to beating his chest about what he's coming for. And he's a threat in a lot of ways, but he's very aggressive on that. And I can't go hard on Singleton anymore. He came up and fist bumped me during what is arguably the lowest of my strongman career on the yoke walk at OSG, where I was at my most vulnerable. And he seems like a really good dude. He is strong as all hell, and it's like the contest on top of the contest. Like, you can train, you can grow, you can adapt to the events, you can turn yourself into an absolute steam engine. But can you transfer that onto a stage on a set timeline with these specific implements, with a crowd watching, with judges? with a proper peak where you're not fatigued from all the crazy shit you did in training. And that's an interesting inside take that you gave, as far as the consistency of certain people just not really coming in and putting it together. Because if you are watching everybody on IG, you don't know that. You don't see it. You have your whole different other conspiracy theories as to why your favorite guy did or didn't do what they did, because, well, 2 weeks ago he was doing X, Y, or Z. And it's like, yeah, well, that's not the sport now, is it? It's a very different animal.
Yeah, and look, Evan fits the description of what I was talking about. But Evan, there's an additional layer of, you never know what is Evan the actual dude and what's Evan the character that he's playing for everyone. So
Really?
he is a great dude. He 100%, like, he is. He's not the heel that he portrays himself to be.
I had a feeling. I mean, it was heel behavior. I think I used that term at some point. But yeah, it's hard to know when people are really being performative, or if that's who they are, or if that's a deliberate thing, and it works. I mean, as that type of WWE kayfabe, like, I think it does work, and it's one of the reasons I don't feel quite as bad when I talk shit, because it is such a. I mean, it's like Kazmaier in his heyday. Like, I talk shit about Kazmaier now. I mean, back in the day, I would have loved to hate him, and I think that does a lot for the sport. And speaking of Kazmaier, I mean, yeah, you might have had a big gap at the Arnold, but was it 28 points? Because that was Kazmaier's gap, and unbeatable, unbeatable his point gap.
World's Strongest Man.
Yeah,
Yeah, mental, absolutely mental.
his favorite thing to tell people. Anyways, so okay, last little bit, we got through the Arnold. We listed off the events one by one. Mitch is confident, it looks like, that we're going to have another Arnold victory, which I don't think anybody here is going to be surprised. How do you feel at this point in your prep? Do you feel ready to go? Everything's going exactly like it should?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I've had one bad session all prep, and of course it was live streamed. Yeah, it's, in the thread of my life not being catered to how to be the best strongman all of the time, I'll do some part sessions down in my basement and some part sessions at the gym. And so, like, my program, I do it all during the week, but how it shakes out is sort of variable. So I had my 4th overhead day in a row, and I was hitting big split jerks 3 days ago, so my tricep tendons were sore, and I just didn't have, like, a power to lock it out. And so it looked horrible. I'm not concerned about it, but just like, of course. But my torn bicep, totally cool. Very frustrating. I just had a heavy single stone to shoulder programs, and I was just feeling it out and seeing where I could get to with just chalk on stones that have never had tacky on them, which is a new pet peeve of mine that I've realized. I was down in LA and I was doing stones, and it was no tacky stones. And I'm doing the stone, and there was tacky all over it. So it was super sticky. And so now I realize that when people go chalk only stone, unless that stone has never been touched with tacky, stop talking to me about chalk only. So anyway, no tacky's ever touched these stones. I did 120 kilo, 265, no problem, great. I did 160 kilo or 300, and I think that's 350. Anyway,
I'm sorry, it was what, 120?
160?
160, 352?
350. I did that, no problem, great. And then I got to the 180, which is just shy of 400. I lapped it, no problem, and I went to extend. I had like this like silky muscle shirt on, and like the stone just started spinning on it, or I would have had it. Damn it. But yeah, like my split jerks are getting much better and much more technically proficient. My stone to shoulder, that's a sneaky good event for me, which like maybe there's no sneakiness left about me being good at an event, but like I really enjoy that more so than loading Atlas stones. The timber trial, I've done stuff, or sorry, the frame carry. I've done grip feats that I've never been able to do before. I've hit the Thomas inch now on my left and my right. I've held 400 kilos in my hands for 10 seconds on a frame that I was never able to do it before. Everything's pointing towards the best performance I've ever had on that. I went through the overhead medley a couple of days ago and did 2 reps on the stone instead of a dumbbell and a stone, because I find that takes more breath out of me, so I want to hammer that a bit harder. I was able to get 2 reps on the log after that at comp weight. And so I think like 3 reps on the log is definitely on the cards for me. My deadlifts are off the charts right now. Well, off of my charts, on Thor's charts, but on short rest I hit a 220 or 422 kilo pull I'll be over 1,000 pounds in the elephant bar, no doubt. And so you put all those things together of what I can do, and it reverts me back to I am in every place I need to be able to win the show. I just need to execute, keep my head on straight, and whatnot. And honestly, in my deepest, darkest thoughts, when I'm alone by myself, do I always think like, okay, obviously I got it. Yeah, it's just what I do. No, I sit there and I'm convincing myself, okay, you are Mitch Hooper, and that means that you have done this, and you have won this many shows, and you always keep your head on, and you always execute. So this is just what you do. Stop thinking about it. There's a fair amount of internal battles going on that no one else would see, but it's my job for no one else to see them for the most part.
Well, I think it makes the rest of us feel better that gentlemen such as yourself battle with those things as well.
Of course.
No, it's very honestly, it's very exciting to hear this package come together in what, from my perspective, is one of the biggest shows I think we've seen in a long time. And we're definitely going to be there watching. I'll be at the Arnold competing in the kiddie pool with the tiny weight class athletes. And we can all do collabs and you can carry us around like little babies afterwards. But I just want to say, Mitch, thank you for doing this. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I think we could probably go on for many more hours. There's so much to cover, but this was truly insightful. Is there anything you want to promote? Any shout outs you want to give? Tell people where they can find you?
My YouTube's Mitch Hooper, my Instagram's Mitch Hooper. If you find me on either one of those platforms, I'm not shy about saying what's going on in terms of what I have to promote. That being said, I am 100%. It's more about who you are than what you do. I did not enter the strongman sphere with the aim of becoming the strongest man in the world. It started because I'm exercising people at one of my businesses with injuries and chronic conditions. I wanted to feel what it was like to get aerobically fit, to lose weight, to get strong. And so in that, this is still my real objective, is to make it as accessible as possible for people to be able to exercise, and not in an economic way, but just in a feeling of someone that looks like me or like you. It doesn't make the gym a less accepting, less welcoming place. And that's where the lift heavy, be kind stuff came from. It's not because I'm always the nicest person. I'm not. My internal dialogue is terrible most of the time. But that message carried forward is something that I want to leave. And I want that to be my legacy more than Mitch Hooper. So if you guys want to look into that, lhbk.shop is where that stuff is. But go ahead, get across my socials and you'll see all that stuff we have to offer. But thank you very much for taking me up on this. I know your audience might be 50-50 on me. I don't know. But ultimately, love me, hate me, I'm going to keep doing my thing.
Well, we'll figure out in the comments where I'm battling it out, telling people why they're wrong. Just like we redefined happiness, we're redefining kindness. Go ahead and check out Mitch's clothing line. I'll have the links for those below. Thanks again, Mitch, for joining us. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.